We are very excited today to have Mr. Glen Pitre with us. We have his title as a multimedia storyteller, but he is so much more than that. He will be presenting today folklore, folkways, folk wisdom, rekindling the past for the present. And we're going to hear from him in just a second. Of course, the folks that bring this program to you, myself, I'm over here at the Wetlands Discovery Center in Houma. We also have Dr. Rachel Doherty, who is the Assistant Director for Programming and Special Projects over at the Center for Louisiana Studies, ULL. We have Maida Owens, who's the Folklife Program Director at the Louisiana Division of the Arts, and Dr. Gary LaFleur, who is the R.E. Miller Endowed Professor of Honors Studies at the Center for Bayou Studies over at Nicholls State University. In this slide, we feel it's important to share with our group that we don't promote any particular adaptation strategy over the other. We're here just to explore the issues and challenges that we're faced as a coastal community. And it's also very important to us to share with our group that why do we think it's important that culture is included in planning? Why is it important that culture has a seat at the land loss table? Because that's such a big issue for us here in coastal Louisiana. Mostly, a big part of that is just that culture is such a source of social cohesion. It helps us survive some of those challenges. Thank you to our partners. And so these are the organizations that bring this program to you: the Center for Bayou Studies over at Nicholls State University, the Wetlands Discovery Center, the Center for Louisiana Studies at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, Louisiana Folklife Program, and the Louisiana Folklore Society. None of our work is possible without our funders, so a big thank you to the National Endowment for the Arts, the Barataria-Terrebonne National Estuary Program, Restore the Mississippi River Delta, the M.J. Sindler Family Fund for Culture and Media, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development through the Division of the Arts, and of course, the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. So a huge thank you to all of those groups who enable us to do this program throughout the year. And so now I'd like to hand this over to our partner in crime, Ms. Maida Owens, who will talk a little bit about today's project spotlight.
Today, we're going to talk about a project instead of an individual artist. And the organization is a Studio in the Woods. They have a artist residency series that they've been doing for decades now. And we're into the environment way before the Bayou Culture Collaborative. One of the artist residency's themes was Rising, Climate and Crisis, where they asked artists to create pieces and gave them time through a residency to work out things, develop a project. Paris Sion participated in this residency, and she worked with the CRCL, Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana, to acquire oysters and created pieces with the oyster shells. But it was truly interdisciplinary and performance art. In the chat, you'll find more information about her and information about their next residency, which is about but anyway, they have another open call called for replenish residencies. I deleted something that I didn't mean to delete. That's why I was caught. But anyway, you can find out more about that open call right now with a deadline at April 7th. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Maida. So for today's agenda, we're going to hear in a minute from Mr. Glen Pitre. We're going to then have question and answers with him. We're going to ask him the question of how do you move forward with intention, because that's our theme for this year. Then we'll give you some working group updates. We'll have time for announcements from the group. And then we hope that folks will stick around for our informal discussion that will last between 12 to 1:30. Again, I love this picture. That's a bull thistle. And that's on our little excursion when we went to get thistles. We left this one alone because, again, like we discussed, this is a little bit bigger than the ideal ones that you want to eat. And the other thing that's important is this is in our secret thistle hunting spot. And so it's very important that they have seeds for next year to be able to get those thistles growing. So this is the one that we left for that. So it is with great pleasure that I am able to introduce to all of you Mr. Glen Pitre, who has done some remarkable work and is also the recipient of the Rivers Prize in Louisiana Studies from ULL this year, to add to the shelf of prizes and awards that this man has received. I'm sure there's a bunch of brackets under that shelf to try to hold them all up from collapsing off the floor. There's so many awards. Mr. Pitre, thank you so very much for being with us today to present Folklore, Folkways, Folk Wisdom, and Rekindling the Past for the Present. Thanks for being here with us.
50 years ago, I met somebody and we became fast friends. His name's Mike Doucet. He's a musician, a Cajun musician. There's a group called Beau Soleil and stuff. And we've been friends, very good friends over the years. And a couple of months ago, he and his wife were staying at the house for a few days. And one evening on the porch, he said, he calls me T-Boy. T-Boy. He goes, you remember how when we were young and we'd go see the older people and we'd ask them questions and we'd learn from them and stuff? I said, yeah. And he said, lately, young people have been coming visit me. And I said, I know. It's happening to me too. And it's kind of freaking me out. Yeah, I'm not here to talk about the potentially depressing mortal not moral, but mortal implications of where you are on the matrix of cultural transmission. But we're going to talk about some of the how of that, some of the things we can do to grease the skids over how we pass down stories and we pass down ways of looking at the world and we pass down how we do things and the things we do. And especially here in South Louisiana, pass down how we interact with the landscape, with the land, with the water, and for us, that the majority of it, which is sort of neither land nor water, but something in between. You know, passing on of culture is by its nature, it's haphazard and it's incremental, and I mean it's going to happen whether Glen Pitre and Maida Owens and Rachel Daugherty are on this side of the grass or under it. I mean, it's going to go on, but there's a lot we can do to help that process along. And you know, I'm talk about that. You know, and all that goes along with that. But before we get to the how, we had a rehearsal yesterday for this talk because they were trying to teach me how to use Zoom, which was very much appreciated. And you know, in that rehearsal, one thing I think it was Maida who said that you know this year's theme is intention. And the other thing she said, which was really hit me, was I said, "Who's the audience? Who am I talking to? A bunch of folklorists? Who I'm talking to?" And they said, "Well, a lot, yes, but a lot of these folks are scientists and environmental scientists and policymakers." And that sort of skewed what I was going to say a little bit, so that before I get to the how, I'd like to talk a little bit about the why. You know, why this stuff is important, why it's important we pass on. All these, you know, what are often obsolete and archaic and ways of doing things, but, you know, to my mind, I think still have value. I mean, part of it is, you know, we retell the stories because stories are fun. I mean, this nation, the world, spend billions and billions of dollars every year on entertainment. And if a story is merely entertaining and has no moral and has no value, I mean, it's still worth something. Uh, and we spend billions around the world on libraries and archives and preserving the you know, the world literature. We have stories that will disappear. I mean, disappear as surely as, you know, some important manuscript will fritter away if left in, you know, left in the moisture. And to the extent we can keep those, help those, there is a value in that. But there's also, you know, I think a practical value. I grew up next to both my grandfathers actually, but one would tell me stories all the time about the great hurricane of 1893, which he lost 4 brothers and sisters and he barely survived. And it would always be, you know, first, you know, what do you do when you figure out a storm is coming? And, you know, you let all the pigs loose. And why do you let the pigs loose? You let the pigs loose because pigs eat snakes. And when the water goes down, the snakes will come to the higher ground, which is where you're living. And if you don't want to get bitten by a water moccasin, you want your pigs eating the snakes. And what do you pack for the storm? You pack what do you call the vide broquin, the whole hand drill, and a casse-tête, a hatchet, because you start drilling holes in your floor so when the water comes up, your house doesn't think it's a boat and float away. And the hatchet, if you go up in the attic and the water still keeps coming, which it did on that day, you got a way to get out. Now, not everybody has pigs, but it's important and potentially life-saving information that we are reminded that you can have venomous snakes around your house after the storm. It's, you know, we don't drill holes in our floor, although people in the lower 9 just down the street from here probably ought to have before Katrina. And taking that hatchet to the attic saved lives in that hurricane. So we're passing on, you know, practical information. And Jonathan, I know you're thinking about the slides, and I haven't forgotten. I'm going to get to them. 1980, 81, I got hired to do an oral history of Terrebonne Parish, and my crew and I did like 150 interviews with old folks. And those recordings were put on tape. You could check them out at the library. Over the decades since, people have transcribed them all. They translated the ones that were in French, volunteers doing that. You know, just a few years ago, when COVID hit, and, you know, first, you know, we heard of people starting to die, and then we heard of people we knew starting to die. And then, you know, if you're like me, you heard of family, you know, relatives starting to die. And just talk about freak out. Well, those oral history tapes, you know, for the folks who listen to them, you would hear about 1919 and the Great Flu, when everybody went around wearing masks. And people were afraid to talk to their neighbors, and they were afraid to go get groceries, and just all the things that are so reminiscent of what we ourselves just went through. And how, yes, lots of people died, but the survivors survived and life returned. And that sort of optimistic might be too strong a word, but the sort of positive bit that you can get through something, even something so cataclysmic. And so I'd like to think that having that knowledge, having that hard-earned wisdom available to share, you know, it was helpful for people today. You know, so there's value in that stuff we pass on. let me share screen. This is the part they rehearsed me on yesterday. Let's replace current share. Is this? Bear with me. I'm not seeing it. You're seeing? Okay, yeah, we're good to go. I was one of those kids in high school who would get out of school early in the spring because the family needed us for commercial fishing. They needed our labor for commercial fishing. I come from a town called Cutoff, and if Cutoff is not cut off enough, in the summer during shrimping season, this is where we'd live. This is Fouchon before there was a Port Fouchon. You know, in the evening, let me figure out how to switch to the next slide here. You know, in the evenings, my mother, who's pictured here, would say, go catch supper. You know, and I'm a teenager, right? You know, I want to stay home. I want to read my book. I want to do this. So you know, of course, what I would do is bribe my little brother, and he'd go catch supper. Is my little brother back then. And would bring back the supper, and you know, so we ate well, except we were 20 minutes away by boat to the landing and 20 minutes more by car to the nearest gas station that kept a shelf of groceries. And we so longed for bread. We wanted bread. Now, on the bayou, as opposed to on the prairies out around Lafayette, where everybody ate cornbread, on the bayous, you had steamboats passing, and so you had access to wheat flour, but you still had to bake it. So 100 years ago, every backyard had a mud oven. And, you know, my little brother and I may be the last people in Louisiana who actually ate from, you know, made and cooked from a mud oven. Everybody had a mud oven. This is before you put the little palmetto roof on it to keep the rain off. But again, passing down the knowledge, passing down the wisdom. I'm not encouraging people to go out and build a mud oven, but every occupation, including simple folk occupations, have their complexities. So I remember the day I went out with my father, and he's cooning oysters here, but it was pretty much the same activity, where we went from spot to spot, and he would reach into the water and pull out a handful of mud and say, Bupuri, no good. And we go to the next spot, Maracafe, no good. You know, Tad Gras, no good. Tad Bleu, oh, we finally found Tad Bleu, blue earth. And that's what you needed to make the mud oven. Now, again, people aren't building a lot of mud ovens. And I'm sure, you know, science can do much better at measuring the viscosity and particle size and whatever else goes into mud, you know, better than he could by just taking up a handful and poking at it. But, you know, when you ask the public to build these huge public works, these restoration plans, these drainage systems, which are going to cost millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, and pay for it over decades with tax money. And they're all asking themselves, why does it cost so much? You know, isn't it useful that the community have that little nugget of knowledge that mud is not just mud? They're different. They're subtleties. Things are complicated. You know, it's all these things serve to make us as a group feel special, which can lead to tribalism and all that, but also makes us feel special and gives us that cohesion that Jonathan was talking about earlier, that gives us the oof to take on big projects, to take on, you know, again, I come from Lafourche, and you know, there's a levee around it. And the levy was not from the top-down federal government. The levy was locally inspired and locally built, and it took that whole community to do it. And to do that, you have to have a common basis, a feeling of shared. Anyway, let me try and move a little faster. One more thing before I get to the how and not the why. You go visit your elderly mama in the nursing home, and that's the day she doesn't remember who you are. You could be anybody. Pleasant visit, but you could be anybody. Now, when you leave, your and her material well-being is not any worse off. She's still going to get her 3 meals. She's still going to have her comfortable bed. She's still going to get all her medicines. You're going to have your spouse and your kids and your gym membership and your Netflix and, you know, whatever else. But don't tell me that you haven't lost something. Now take that lost memory and write it out large across a community, across a culture. You know, if we forget all the rural stories and we don't know how to, you know, the differences in mud and all of that stuff, we're still going to get 3 square meals a day, and we're still going to have most of us are still going to have a place to sleep, and on and on and on and on and on. But we are going to be worse off for it. We are going to be less. Anyway, how? You know, I spoke briefly about the archive, and that's a very useful thing. And it's what's great about it is it's relatively low tech. You can record people talking. You don't need a lot of fancy equipment. Nowadays, we can get great recordings just on our phone. Helps to have a mic attached to it. Just let people tell their stories. You know, that's part one. You know, we don't have time to go into all the details of how to do a good interview, but part two is make sure that stuff ends up somewhere beside the phone that you're eventually going to lose or break or give up. Make sure that stuff gets up somewhere where there is access to it. I often drive archivists crazy because, you know, it's like, you know, you didn't get a release for that. I said, well, look, they're talking to me, you know, they're looking at me at the camera. I figure there's a certain implied release there, legally and ethically. But at least get it down there and make sure it's available to someone. It's so easy to share that stuff. Even if you start out just sharing it with relatives. Look, you know, look at the interview I did with Tont Nunu or Tont Nana or whatever. Next up, documentaries. And I've done a bunch of documentaries. Here's one we did, this is going back a ways, on folk medicine. So we are recording the rituals, and also, you know, this woman was, I think Miss Ella here was, I think, showing us how to break a hex, or set a hex. I think it was break a hex. Here's a woman making homemade cough syrup, which she did every winter, or did every fall for the winter. Here's an environmental documentary. This guy's smoking a baby, which, you know, it's like, okay, you may have a little problem with that one, but is also gathering the herbs. So there's, again, you know, practical knowledge here. We talked about eating thistle earlier, where there's all sorts of medicinal plants. You know, are some just placebos? Yeah, probably. Do some have, you know, pharmacological value? Maybe. A lot of the places where these things grow are washing away, or the salinity is increasing so much the plants won't grow anymore. But there's a value to recording what's there now, catching hold of it, preserving it. We don't know how or if it'll be used. The advantage of documentaries is you can share easily. I mean, more than listening to a tape. I mean, these things, I mean, this one ran on, I think, yeah, this one was national on public television. And so people, you know, it goes out there. It's seen by lots of folks. Sometimes the documentaries, at least the ones I've done, because you can probably tell by now I'm not a purist, you know, sometimes they verge toward movies, you know, you know, this was a film we were calling Hurricane Warning, and we are staging Hurricane Audrey in a marina. So you talked about water oaks. This is a water oak, which was about to fall in the canal. We cut it down, used the crane to lower it in. There's a roof you can't see, chunk of roof, and there's a family of 5 and their dog. And, you know, when the sun went down, we staged Hurricane Audrey, and then the way the family actually rescued themselves in the tree. Sometimes these, you know, you use these things to show what you can show. I mean, is there a leap that sometimes sets you a little bit outside authenticity? Yeah, maybe. But we couldn't go back to Hurricane Audrey. In this same film, you know, 4 weeks after we thought we had finished filming, Katrina hit. So it was more shooting. And this time, we weren't filming during the storm, but the post-storm. So you can record events that, on one hand, bring events in the local culture, and not always this traumatic, they can also be positive events, but events in the local culture to a wider audience. And at the same time, preserve it. I'm upstairs in my studio as we speak, and yesterday we had a visitor, Ed Buckles, who did a movie called Katrina Babies, about all the kids who grew up post-Katrina. Well, now we got grandkids growing up post-Katrina who, you know, have the visual record now. So it's like the stories I heard from my grandfather, you know, he didn't have pictures. I mean, they saved nothing after that storm. And now we can augment visually what happened and what went on. And then there's, you know, you keep going for, you know, I've been very fortunate in my career. I made movies, I've got to direct like a half dozen Oscar winners and Emmy winners, and you know, a lot of big actors. We're talking about Tim Curry from Rocky Horror. I got to had Tim Curry living in Lockport, Louisiana for 6 weeks playing a priest from Cutoff in 1945. But this one, I think, is an interesting case for a couple of reasons. One is it just resurfaced. I shot this in the summer of 1979. I was 24 years old. And just last year, the Golden Globes, who put on the awards, declared it a classic of American independent cinema, which was great, and paid to restore it, which was even greater for my mind. So went back and he put it all together again. But here was a story in the community which was passing into folklore. And for me, that's always a fascinating moment when history becomes folklore. And what we did, we had two men, it was a fisherman's strike, and we had 2 men who, one was the strike leader, one was his cousin who was hired to break the strike, and they both still alive, 40 years after the fact. and both tell the story. And then we basically got the whole town. There are like 400 people in this movie. And some sided with one and some sided with the other, and they reenacted it. So we could incorporate that cultural transmission, that passing of lore with all its complexities and all its failings and all the improvements that come from taking a bit of history and turning it into a better story, into the process of making the film, and therefore in the film itself. This is me when I had black hair in the corner here. And people loved it. I mean, because it, you know, when there's nothing wrong with home movies are good. And when you can do home movies for your community, when you can make those home movies capture things which are passing away, not people passing away necessarily, but activities and customs and you know, I saw Susan Roach on the list of watchers. I mean, that Easter walk dance, you know, you know, help keep alive. I mean, that stuff, when we can keep that, you know, we give the chance for either it to be held on to, which is great, or in some cases, brought back after the fact. You know, the way immersion schools are bringing back, you know, Louisiana French, which was disappearing, or we did one documentary on the Vietnamese community, Vietnamese American community in Eastern New Orleans. And, you know, there's the whole drum corps thing, which had died out completely and was resurrected because they could find tapes and because they could find recordings of it and bring it back to life. And then the museums. This is I think this is in Thibodaux. This is the Jean Lafitte Center. I wrote the text for it way back. This is Jonathan's Water Life Museum in Houma, which we did like late 90s, I believe it was. And I have a lot more to say about this, but I realize I'm running short on time. This is painting the mural in the studio, in Robert Dafford's studio in Lafayette. And this is a current project. This is not a museum, it's a visitor center, which kind of the same, but kind of different, because you're not trying to use it to impart the knowledge so much as encourage people to say, ooh, I want to stay in this place. There's more to explore. There's more to look at. So these are just a couple of the renderings I did, but you know, there's a great quote from Charlevoix, who was the French king had sent to the Louisiana colony or North America to write a report back in the early 1700s. And he got to New Orleans, where they were just laying out that famous grid of what's now the French Quarter. And his report said, they have a beautiful plan for the city, but I fear it was easier to draw than it will be to build. Well, that's true about a lot of things. So, but this thing is being built. We've created these map surfaces, and you know, there's a whole process of picking out what's the iconography that represents not just the whole region, but subsections. It represents neighborhoods, represents places. You know, what do you want to listen to in the audio station? There, you know, 10 video monitors popping out of this map. Which, you know, working on all the interactive, so the buttons work when you press the buttons, and this happens and that happens, and it knows when you're coming close. And just raw carpentry of building the thing. I don't like straight lines. There are a lot of curves. The curves are complicated. You know, they wanted an oak tree as symbolic of Upper Lafourche, you know, and can't bring an oak tree into the building, so we're building them an oak tree as a relief on the wall. You know, they wanted a photo opportunity with an alligator, and you know, there's so many places we can take a picture with an alligator. I figured, well, at least we can have 2 alligators. So we got 2 alligators. And then we also have, you know, they call them stand-ins, where you put your face in a thing. And so you put your face in, but you put your hands through, because there's a big seafood feast on this one. But the one I prefer, and this will be my last slide, is the dance hall scene. So you put your face and you put your hands through, but your hands through, you get to play the washboard as you put your hands in the thing. So, point of all this, to the extent there even is one, the point of all this is, you know, it's okay to be fun. It's okay to be playful. You know, you want to, you know, all those recordings I've done, all those documentaries I've done, all the, you know, the best moments were always the unexpected, when the humor popped through. You saw Miss Ella, the Creole woman who was carving on the ground to remove a hex. We sat with her and we were filming, and people would call for prayers from her for healing, because she could heal at long distance. And you know, it's like call after call after call. And then there was one that was very strange, and she's giving, you know, often she would give prescriptions for do this, and you had to do certain things with certain materials in a certain order and stuff. And she's doing one, but it's different from all the others. And when she hung up, I said, "What was that?" She goes, "Oh, that's my sister. She wanted to know how I cook sausage for my." So you know, the joy in it, that this is, you know, it's too easy to talk about this and have it sound like an antiseptic, dry process, but giving a helping hand to the passing on of culture is fun. I mean, it's been fun for me for the last 50 years. It's fun. And it should be fun. And I don't know, I guess we're done fun.
Thank you so much for that, Glenn. I think that I speak for the majority of us when I say that you are a true treasure to the state of Louisiana, the United States, the planet. Seriously, man, I appreciate everything we all appreciate everything that you do and the perspective that you bring to all of this. One thing that we like to ask our presenters, because this year our theme is moving forward with intention. I think a lot of what you gave to us today and spoke about was very much this, but if you could give us that maybe one you know, nugget of, like, this is a way that you can move forward with intention in terms of transferring culture or preserving culture, what would that be?
I found the single most important thing is letting folks know, letting the folks who are still doing the stuff that, you know, the traditional ways, know that you find value in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, recognizing that. I mean, we all want to be appreciated, no matter who we are. And it's so easy to say, you know, this is old fashioned. You know, there's as we'd say in Cajun, c'est plus d'allure. There's no more allure, there's no more value to it. And that someone still finds value will often jar memories that are forgotten, will sometimes get people to go back and do stuff they hadn't done. And I mean, yeah, if you know, you plunk down some money and buy the artifact, great, but it doesn't have to be monetary. It just has to be appreciation.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And thank you for being with us today. Um, let's open this up for maybe one or two questions for Glenn right now. And then please stick around for the informal part of the gathering, and we'll continue this conversation with Glenn. Anyone have any questions for Glenn or any comments? Please raise your hand virtually, and then I can see that you'd like to speak, and then we can share that with Glenn. Uh, while you're thinking of your questions, I'll jump in and say, um, I have never heard the what you said about your mom at the old folks home and dementia maybe setting in, and you didn't lose anything materially, but tell me you didn't lose something, and then put that over a whole community. Dude, yeah. I have never heard that, and man, it hit me so hard. And that is something that I'm never gonna forget, to be able to share that, because that's a feeling, and that you've lost something. So I mean, first of all, thank you for putting that into words that I've never heard, so and with such an impact. That's a lot. Anybody have questions for Glenn? Yes, Mr. Mark.
Hi, thanks, Glenn,
Hi.
for your talk. And the question I had has to do with when you said, go ahead and document those stories. Get out your phone and use that voice memo app or whatever, right?
Huh?
And put it up somewhere where people can see it or hear it. But but then there's like, should they use archive or just put it up on YouTube? Or the Internet Archive a few months ago released a report called Vanishing Culture, which I contributed a short essay to, where they talked about, what happens if YouTube goes away or they change their policies. Right? People put a lot of stuff up on YouTube or other social media and think it's going to be there forever, and ain't necessarily so. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is you take as many approaches as you can manage. You by all means put it up on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever whatever flavor you like, but also pass it on. Also see if there's a local university that's keeping a digital archive, which is a lot less, if it's already there, it's a lot less. Rachel can speak to this better than I, but it's a lot less intensive than some physical boxes that you're given to them. It's less space intensive. YouTube may go away, but everything at the end of the day, everything is ephemera if we don't take steps to preserve it. That film I showed you, Weep Touched Me with the shrimp war, that was lost. I mean, I had a DVD made from a VHS, made from a very scratched 16 millimeter print after it came out of theaters. After Katrina flooded, the lab flooded, I thought it was all gone. It was the Golden Globes who found all the bits and pieces at UCLA and here and there and everywhere. To the extent it's in a lot of duplication is the secret. Get it out there in as many spots as you can, and I don't know what else you could do. It's sort of you don't, what they say about, your hard drive, you always need 3 copies, one at a different site. Well, the same with these recordings. I mean, make sure there are multiple copies and in multiple places. And I know, again, 50 years of making films and documentaries and recordings and what have you. I've been giving away my stuff. So I can, so I ain't gonna be around forever. So I can spread it out there, and I'm trying to scatter it as opposed to like a Glen Pitre archive somewhere. I'm trying to make sure it's in as many places as possible so that, you know, if one of them goes down, I mean, I've heard so many horror stories in the 60s. So they had some new photo director at the Times-Picayune who decided he needed space and threw away their whole photo archive.
Oh my God.
I got pictures here somebody brought me because they pulled them out of a dumpster outside of Wildlife and Fisheries. And it was all photos used in the Conservationist magazine over decades, and they just threw them out. I mean, you hear those horror stories, and the only, you know, the only defense against that is duplication and getting it in different places.
Thank you.
The other thing, you talked about YouTube, we did a radio series way back, Cajun and Creole storytelling. We had like 31 half-hour episodes. And someone else lately has been taking them and building lesson plans, because they're all in French, to learn Cajun French around them, and, you know, transcribing them and everything else, which is, you know, this stuff's 30 years old. And so things can have a life long past the intended life, if they're out there, if they're available.
Thank you for that. Rachel, real quick, and then we're gonna wrap up and then go into the informal session. But
yeah,
yes.
I just wanted to comment on what you just said, Glenn, because I've been talking about that very thing with about your archived radio series. So we've been seeing the people in the French-speaking community, people who are invested in learning Louisiana French, teaching it, increasing access to it. We've been noticing these because that's Amanda LaFleur who's doing that, and she's sharing them. She's playing around with transcription software to speed up the process that she's been doing as a teacher for years. She's making these YouTube videos and she's just putting them out in Facebook groups. So something that I've seen in my work at the university with students that are in the French graduate program is they're seeing that. And so they're like, where are these coming from? What's the source material? So a couple of students have found on your website, Cote Blanche Productions, where you have just a Google Drive so that people can go and listen to your archived radio program. And so these are students that are interested in communications and even who work in French communications. And so they're mining this archive just to get inspiration, because some of these recordings, I mean, I think we have them at the Center for Louisiana Studies, but, you know, this, as you just said, these are in multiple places. So it's open access, it's in multiple places. And yeah, just being, and I want to also go back to what you said about appreciation. That's so key, whether it's older people who have a perspective that might be going away, or younger people who have a new idea. It's so important to encourage people to document their stuff, reproduce it, archive it, and share it, because you never know who's, and I mean, I need to be reminded of that all the time, that I need to go back, I need to update my CV, I need to update my stuff and put things out there that I've done, because it might be helpful to someone. So thanks for just getting to the like emotional root of a lot of that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Mr. John, real quick, and then we're gonna wrap up and go to the informal session. Yes, Mr. John Ducey.
Sure, Glenn, I don't have a question for you. I just wanted to say hi. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us, and congratulations on that Golden Globe effort. So once again, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thank you, my dear friend.
All right, so moving forward, this is the information about our working groups and when they meet. If you want more information about this, please reach out to one of the management members. We'll put you in touch with the right folks. We've got the French Language Preservation Group, Culture and Coastal Planning, Artists and Tradition Bearers, Protecting Collections, and Preparing Receiving Communities. So we'd encourage you to join one of those groups if that is something that you're more interested in. We are very excited to have Ms. Christine Verdun at our next gathering, which will be Friday, April 25th at noon. She is the director of École Pontchartrain, which is the first French immersion school in Terrebonne and Lafourche. So we hope that you'll join us to learn more about the work that's happening down in Pontchartrain and how we can support the work that they're doing there. Anybody have any particular announcements that you would like to make to share with the rest of the group? Anyone? Going once, twice.
I'll make an announcement. I'll put it in
Yes.
the chat.
Okay.
If you are in the Lafayette area or would want to come to the Lafayette area on April 3rd, I'm going to put our events. We're having a workshop on Easter traditions in French Louisiana. And it's mainly going to be focusing on like folkways, beliefs, customs, traditions around Easter, Lent, Good Friday, anything. So there's like a story swapping portion at the beginning. It's going to be at the Center for Louisiana Studies at 5:30 on April 3rd. That's a Thursday. And that story swapping is going to be led by, like we want the public to come and share if they have memories of folkways beliefs, like, you know, don't dig in the ground on Good Friday, just anything. And so we will have Father Jason Vidrine, who's a priest and speaks Louisiana French, and we'll have Christy Guillory, who is a musician and accordionist, but is also a religious scholar and a folklorist. And they're going to kind of like explain or lead a discussion on where these beliefs may come from. So that's one portion. But the second portion is going to be a dig into our archives, and our director and one of our grad students, we're going to be giving a workshop on cantique, which are hymns, but these are like folk hymns, popular spiritual songs that have Easter themes, most of which were preserved, and they're in French, but we'll have like translations. We'll kind of teach the meaning for folks who don't speak French, but these are preserved among Louisiana Creoles. So we're looking specifically at these hymns, a lot of which focus on Mary Magdalene. So this is very interesting type of folk song that's religious. So we're tying like religious folkways into just like broader culture for Easter. So y'all come if you can.
Very cool. I appreciate that. When I tell you that my grandmother wholeheartedly believed that if anybody dug a hole in the dirt on Good Friday, it would be filled with blood. And so we would, as children, we were terrified. We were like, nobody just stay inside. Don't even take a chance that you go outside for that. Also, I think tomorrow, and forgive me, this is in Arnoldville. You can find it on Facebook. There is a traiteur that is doing a nature walk, I think, at Brandon Bellinger's place. If I may be misremembering this, but I think it is tomorrow. I think it starts at 10. You find the information out on Facebook, and they do ask that you register for it. Maida, can you help me to remember the woman's name who's the traiteur, please?
Becca Begno.
Becca, thank you so much for that. So she'll be out there, and I believe it's going to be sort of a nature walk, discussing some of the practices of the traiteurs. So definitely try to check that out. All right, so this concludes our gathering for today.